Hi, I'm Maura Hale, and I used to believe my family would die before they'd ever betray me. But last fall, I came home early, and from behind the front door, I heard my mother whisper, "Are you sure she won't notice?" My father replied, cold, calm, "Our daughter always trusts us. Using her name keeps us safe." And then they laughed. In that moment, everything inside me cracked. The people I loved most were laundering money in my name, and they thought I'd never find out. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just smiled, walked away, and made one call. Now the sirens won't stop. But tell me, what would you do if the ones who raised you were the ones trying to ruin you? Would you stay silent? Or would you burn it all down? The road curved gently beneath my tires as I turned onto Sycamore Lane, the maple trees dressed in gold and rust overhead like they'd been waiting for me. Asheville looked exactly as I'd left it. Quiet, slow-moving, too familiar. I could still smell the cinnamon from the cookies on the passenger seat. A little gift basket I'd put together with more care than I'd admit. My mom's favorite oatmeal raisin, a handwritten card, and an old photo of us three, me at 12, braces and all, squished between my parents at Lake Lure. I even found a frame that matched the one they used to keep on the hallway table. I hadn't been back like this in years. No calls, no warnings. Just me, a rental car, and good intentions. The sun was melting into the trees as I pulled up the driveway. Their porch light flickered on just as I turned off the engine. Familiar, comforting. I sat there a moment, adjusting the collar of my coat, then looked down at the basket beside me. "Let's hope this makes up for last year," I murmured to no one, reaching for the gift. Dad's birthday had come and gone while I was stuck on back-to-back depositions in Houston. I'd sent flowers. It felt cheap. I stepped out into the crisp air, the leaves crunching beneath my boots as I made my way to the porch. The door was slightly ajar, as always. Mom never did like closing it all the way. Said it made the house feel too shut off. I smiled at the thought. Then I heard it. "Are you sure she won't notice?" It was Mom's voice, hushed but distinct. I froze mid-step, one foot on the welcome mat. A pause. Then Dad's voice, colder than I remembered. "Our daughter always trusts us. Using her name keeps us safe." The gift basket wobbled in my grip. They couldn't be talking about me, could they? My heart beat so loud I swore they'd hear it from inside. I stepped quietly off the mat and leaned a little closer to the open window. The curtain just slightly parted. There was rustling, papers maybe, and laughter, not warm, not familiar. "She'll never find out," Mom said again, her tone light, careless, like they were sharing a joke over dinner. The basket slipped from my fingers before I realized. It hit the porch with a dull thud. I heard the glass frame crack. I didn't move. I couldn't. Through the curtain, I could just make out Dad, sitting at the dining table, flipping through a stack of forms, my name printed neatly at the bottom of each page. "She signs everything without reading," Mom chuckled. "Such a good girl." My chest tightened. Something bitter crawled up my throat. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned. Like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car was my life, and they were driving it straight into a wall. I stepped back from the window. I needed air, or answers, or both. The porch light above me flickered again, casting shadows on the steps like something out of a dream you wake from too late. The kind that stays with you all day. I walked back to the car, not quickly, not slowly, just moving. Like my legs knew something my heart hadn't caught up to yet. Sliding into the driver's seat, I didn't start the engine. I stared straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel like it could hold me together. "I always thought love protected you," I whispered to the empty car. "I didn't know it could use your name to destroy you." The words didn't feel like mine, not yet. but they sat in my chest like lead. My phone buzzed. Asha, you okay? Still driving? I looked at the house, the window where I just stood, the silhouettes inside. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I'm home, I typed. Nothing else. I didn't knock, I didn't call, I just watched. The windows glowed like they always had, safe, warm, ordinary. But I saw them differently now, like the lights had turned on to reveal something rotten beneath. And I sat there, not ready to walk away, and not ready to go inside either. I thought silence would keep me safe. I didn't know it would make me part of their secret. That night, I drove home with both hands glued to the steering wheel, as if loosening my grip would let everything unravel faster. The world outside my window stayed quiet. Still trees, dim streetlights, no traffic. But inside my head, it was chaos. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, fully dressed, the gift basket still on the floor near the door. I watched the sunrise paint the ceiling pale gold and told myself maybe I'd misheard. Maybe they were talking about someone else. Maybe it was all just a misunderstanding wrapped in a bad memory. I held on to that lie until my phone rang the next morning. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said cheerfully, as if nothing had shifted beneath our feet. "How's your weekend going?" I hesitated. "Oh, quiet," I replied, testing her tone. "Thinking of stopping by sometime soon?" "That would be lovely. How about Sunday dinner? Your father's grilling. We haven't seen you in so long." Like we didn't live 15 minutes apart. Like I hadn't been parked in front of their house less than 12 hours ago, watching their shadows scheme behind the curtains. Still, I heard myself say, "Yeah, Sunday sounds good," because some part of me needed proof, and the other part wanted to hear them lie to my face. Sunday came quickly, the way dread always seems to speed up time. I pulled into the same driveway just before dusk. The porch light was already on, steady this time, and the house looked the way it always had, freshly swept steps, a faint scent of rosemary from the backyard garden. Inside, the table was dressed like a scene from a magazine. Candles flickering, linen napkins folded just so. My favorite pie, cherry, cooling by the window. But it all felt too staged, too perfect. Mom greeted me with a tight hug and a wide smile. "There's my girl." Dad gave a nod from the kitchen, where he was slicing brisket with unnecessary precision. We made small talk over wine, the weather, my work, his bad back, her book club. But underneath it all, I felt the pull of something unsaid, like a riptide just below the surface. Then, just as I reached for a second roll, Mom stood up and disappeared down the hall. When she returned, she carried a manila folder. "Just some insurance updates," she said lightly, sliding it toward me like it was a napkin. My stomach turned. I opened it slowly. Inside, forms with my name, sections already filled in, highlighted signatures. Familiar language, business protection, joint ownership, liability transfers. I glanced at Dad. He was focused on his plate, his knife cutting a little too hard against the porcelain. "What is this, really?" I asked. Mom's voice stayed calm, too calm. "Nothing urgent. Just a few things we're adjusting with the business. It's easier if everything stays in the family." "Why now?" She reached across the table, her hand resting gently over mine. "Because we trust you, Maura. You've always helped us when we needed it. You're the responsible one." Dad finally looked up, expression unreadable. "You've always trusted us, haven't you?" he asked. And it wasn't a question. It was a cue. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. My fingers tingled. Everything in me screamed to get up, to shout, to throw the folder in their faces and walk out. But I didn't. I smiled, forced, thin. "Of course," I said, and picked up the pen. I signed. It was quiet after that. Too quiet. Mom's face lit up like she'd won something. "See, we knew you'd understand." The pie sat untouched. I excused myself to the kitchen, said I needed water. The room hadn't changed. Same cabinets, same dishes, same tiny chip on the edge of the sink. And then I saw it. The glass cup I used to drink from as a kid. The one with the tiny crack near the rim, the one Dad refused to throw away because a crack doesn't mean it's useless. I picked it up and ran my thumb along the fracture. Some things break quietly. I walked back in, said I needed to get home early, work in the morning, an early call. They nodded, didn't press. But just as I reached the entryway, I noticed Dad at his briefcase. He slipped another folder inside, one I hadn't signed. The one I had signed was still sitting on the table behind me. I paused, heart thudding, the truth landing hard. Whatever I'd just agreed to, it wasn't what they'd planned to use. He looked up. Our eyes met. I smiled. "Good night, Dad." He didn't answer. I drove off into the dark, hands trembling around the steering wheel, every breath shallow and hot. If they could forge my signature, maybe they already had. And if they hadn't yet, I was beginning to understand. They didn't need my permission anymore. I didn't take the highway home. I needed the extra time, the back roads, the quiet dark. I needed to sit in what just happened, let it burn its way through my chest so I wouldn't go numb to it, again. By the time I reached my apartment downtown, the city lights were starting to blur through my windshield. I parked, climbed the stairs, and locked the door behind me without turning on a single light. The silence was deafening. No laughter, no forks clinking against plates. No one calling me sweetheart while slipping papers under my nose. Just me. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Same style of glass as the one back home, but this one didn't have a crack. Still intact, still mine. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. If they could use my name, what's stopping them from erasing it completely? I didn't wait for morning. I powered up my laptop and signed into my bank account. The moment the screen loaded, my stomach sank. There it was, a transaction I didn't recognize. $45,000 labeled as a business transfer. The recipient? A company I'd never heard of. A generic-sounding LLC buried under vague words like consulting and management. The kind of name designed to mean nothing and hide everything. I clicked faster now, pulled my credit report, opened a few old email folders. The more I looked, the more it snowballed. My name listed as co-owner of 2 businesses, both registered back in my hometown, addresses I recognized, buildings my parents had once rented out. I hadn't signed anything for either, but the state's digital records said I had. I sat frozen in front of the screen. These weren't accidents. This wasn't someone helping me. This was orchestrated, and they were good at it. I picked up my phone. Eli answered on the second ring. "Hey, sis, everything okay?" I skipped the pleasantries. "Did you know Mom and Dad used my name on some company paperwork?" There was a pause, then a slow exhale. "Maura, don't make this a thing. I'm asking you directly." "It's just paperwork," he said. "They needed someone to list. It's not like it's illegal." "Is that why you didn't tell me?" I asked, voice tight. "Because it's not illegal?" "I'm hanging up now," he said quietly. "You're being dramatic." Click. So he knew. He always knew. I set the phone down carefully. My whole body was tense, but my thoughts were sharper now, more focused. I opened a drawer and grabbed a fresh binder, the thick kind with reinforced rings. I labeled the spine with one word: truth. I printed every file, every screenshot, bank records, emails, business registrations, copies of forms with my name typed, stamped, copied. My signatures, or what looked like it, appearing on lines I'd never seen before. Page after page, the weight of betrayal stacked in my lap. One document stood out, my mom's handwriting. I recognized it from birthday cards and old grocery lists. She'd written out my signature over and over in the margins of a practice sheet. I used to joke that we had the same handwriting. I used to like that. I turned back to the computer, heart pounding harder with each click. I was chasing a ghost trail now, and then I found it. An email from my father's address, dated 6 months ago. Subject line, consent from Maura Hale confirmed. It had gone to a lawyer. I was CC'd, technically. But it had gone to an old work email I no longer used. The message read plainly, "As discussed, Maura has reviewed and agrees to the terms listed. Consider this confirmation for legal purposes." I hadn't reviewed anything. I hadn't agreed. But that message made it all look legitimate. I slammed the laptop closed and stood up, pacing. It felt like I was walking through a house on fire, one memory at a time, watching it all turn to smoke. They didn't just use my name, they used my trust, my silence, my belief that family protected you by default. I looked at the binder, at the neat rows of lies laid out like evidence. I sat back down, opened a blank message on my phone, and stared at it for a long minute. Then I typed one line, "Meet me tomorrow. I need to talk." I didn't name who it was for. I didn't need to, because I knew they'd read it. And for once, I wanted them to wonder what I knew, and what I planned to do next. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sky had turned that in-between shade of blue and gray, where the light's fading but not quite gone. A strange calm came over me. Maybe it was focus, maybe resignation. But either way, I knew I couldn't leave until I said what needed to be said. The house looked exactly the same. Neat hedges, porch light glowing like always, even the welcome mat with the fading, "Home sweet home." I sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, going over everything I'd rehearsed. I wasn't here to yell. I wasn't here to fight. I wanted answers. That was it. Or at least, that's what I told myself. When I finally stepped inside, my mom was already waiting near the hallway. She smiled like I hadn't stormed out days ago, like we were still living in some version of reality where trust was mutual and unbroken. "It's good to have you home, sweetheart," she said, brushing a hand down my arm. Her touch made me flinch, though I tried to hide it. My dad followed a moment later, arms open, pulling me into a brief hug. His cologne was the same one he wore to my college graduation. That smell used to make me feel safe. Tonight, it made my stomach turn. I looked past them toward the dining room. The table was already set. Too perfect, candles lit, silverware aligned like a showroom. There was even a pie cooling on the windowsill, like we were in a postcard. But Eli's chair was empty, and there, just barely peeking from under the floral placemat near my dad's seat, was a manila folder. I walked toward the table, sat down, and placed my own folder, the one I'd labeled Truth, right in the center. "I brought some things," I said calmly. My dad didn't ask what. He just picked up the coffee pot and poured 2 mugs, even though none of us drank coffee this late. It was all for show. I opened my folder and spread the pages out, one by one. The emails, the banking transfers, the LLC registrations. And then I looked up. "Can you explain these?" My father barely glanced. "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand the business side of things." My mom reached across the table and touched the edge of a document. "Honey, we did it to protect you. There were tax issues, liability stuff. We just needed a clean name." I blinked. "A clean name? You used mine, without asking." My father's voice lost its warmth. "You've always trusted us, haven't you? Don't start making this ugly." That phrase hit me like a slap. It was the same one I'd heard through the window that night, the one that shattered everything. I swallowed hard. "You forged my signature." Silence. Then my father leaned back, no longer pretending to smile. "And what exactly do you plan to do, Maura? Call the cops? On your own parents?" His words hung in the air, bitter and heavy. My mom's eyes welled up, But it wasn't guilt, it was something colder, pity, as if I was the one ruining something sacred. "We raised you," she said softly. "Don't throw away the family name over something like this." I sat back, breathing slowly, letting every word settle before I answered. They thought my silence was loyalty, I thought. It was mourning. I gathered the papers back into my folder, keeping my voice low and steady. "If either of you ever use my name again, for anything, if a single dollar moves through my account without my consent, you won't have to worry about the family name anymore. You won't have a family left." My chair scraped as I stood up. I left the front door open behind me. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my father call after me. "You'll regret this, Maura." I didn't turn around. "I already do." The door creaked shut on its own. Back in the car, I sat in the dark for a moment, staring at the empty seat beside me. I wasn't shaking this time, just focused. I opened my phone and scrolled down to Asha's name. My thumb hovered for only a second before I typed the message. "I need a lawyer, not a friend, a lawyer." I hit send. Outside the window, the porch light flickered once, just like before. "They used my name to hide their crimes," I whispered. "I'll use mine to end them." The morning after that final conversation with my parents, I sat alone at my kitchen table, surrounded by papers and cold coffee cups. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, casting stripes across the hardwood floor, but I barely noticed. Outside, I could hear life moving forward, a school bus stopping on the corner, a couple walking their dog, someone dragging out their recycling bin. But inside my apartment, time had slowed. They thought I'd stay quiet, and they were right, but not for the reason they think. I opened my laptop again. The screen lit up with all the files I had compiled, PDFs, spreadsheets, email screenshots, each one more infuriating than the last. My binder labeled "Evidence Now Barely Shut." A notification popped up. "Asha Patel. Send me everything, and don't talk to them again." That one line snapped the numbness off my skin like ice cracking under pressure. Asha wasn't just my old roommate from Chapel Hill anymore. She was a corporate attorney in Raleigh now, sharp, unflinching, and loyal to a fault. Within minutes, I forwarded every document: the bank records with unexplained transfers, the tax forms with forged signatures, the emails sent with my name in CC. It felt strange, sharing it all, but also necessary, like dragging a wound into the light before it could fester. 10 minutes later, her reply came. "This isn't small, Maura. This is federal." I stared at that sentence, not emotional, not dramatic, just fact. I leaned back, letting the words settle. Then I got to work. The next few hours blurred. I dug into public records, tracing company names linked to my Social Security number, one in Georgia, another in South Carolina. There was even a mortgage in my name, tied to a property I'd never seen. My browser history looked like it belonged to a forensic accountant, not a 33-year-old art teacher on medical leave. Each click, each search, tightened the knot in my stomach. They didn't just use me, they built their lives on me. I printed everything, stacking the pages methodically into the binder. I labeled dividers, banking, real estate, communications, LLCs. With each label, I felt less like a daughter and more like a detective. Somewhere around mid-afternoon, I paused to stretch. My eye caught a small box of tech odds and ends near the bookshelf. Inside, buried under a phone charger and a cracked CD case, was an old USB drive. It had a smiley face sticker on it, probably something I slapped on back in college. The label read, "Family Memories." I plugged it into my laptop. Photos, dozens of them. Birthday parties, beach trips, backyard barbecues. For a second, I forgot why I was angry. I scrolled through pictures of myself blowing out candles, hugging my brother, riding on Dad's shoulders. Then one photo stopped me. It was Dad, sitting at his desk, smiling wide, arm around my mother. Behind them, barely visible on the whiteboard, were numbers, long ones. The same. Strings I'd seen in the fake company documents. My stomach dropped. I checked the timestamp. It was taken the same week he'd called to tell me he was so proud of my new consulting gig. I hadn't taken any new job, but they had. Every time they said they were proud, they were just making sure I stayed blind. That night, I drove halfway to Raleigh and met Asha at a tiny diner off I-85. She looked the same. Fierce brows, pressed blazer, gold nose ring. Except now her eyes held a fire I hadn't seen since college debates in our dorm room. She didn't waste time with hugs. "We're not confronting them directly," she said. "Not yet. We document, we record, we wait." I nodded. "They'll think I'm scared," I said. "That's how I'll win." After dinner, I bought a call recorder online. I changed the settings on my phone to save every voicemail. I downloaded an app that would back up every text. Every sweetheart, every we love you, every fake apology, I'd turn them all into evidence. My silence would no longer be submission. It would be strategy. 3 days passed. I went to work. I smiled at neighbors. I posted a picture of my cat to Instagram like everything was normal. But every night I reviewed the file, tightened timelines, labeled folders, wrote down what I'd say if it ever came to court. And then it came. Thursday night. The phone buzzed while I was folding laundry. The name on the screen lit up like a warning. Mom. I waited. 1 ring, 2. On the 3rd, I answered. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was soft, too soft. "Sweetheart, we need your help signing something small for the accountant. Just a formality. You're good with signing things, right?" I almost laughed. Instead, I reached toward my phone and pressed record. "Sure, Mom," I said. "Send it over." The pause on her end was brief, just enough to tell me she hadn't expected that answer. We exchanged a few more pleasantries. She said she missed me, asked if I was eating well, told me the neighbor's dog had puppies. I smiled through every word. By the time I hung up, the file had saved. The next lie they tell me will be the last. By the time they realized I wasn't helping, I was already 3 steps ahead. A full week passed. I barely slept. I ate only because Asha kept texting reminders to. The lights in my apartment buzzed louder. Even the walls started to feel like they were leaning in, listening. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes before destruction. It's heavy, charged, like the air before a storm. I could hear the city outside carrying on as if nothing had changed. People walked dogs. Kids yelled across the courtyard. Someone played an old Motown record too loud on the 3rd floor. Meanwhile, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by manila folders and sticky notes. My fingers flipped through records like rosary beads. You can love your family and still know they're dangerous. That morning, I got a call. It was my father. He never calls this early. I let it ring twice, steadied my breath, then answered. "Hi, Dad." There was a pause, then his voice, too casual, too careful. "We've noticed you've been distant lately. You're not talking to anyone about family matters, are you?" Not angry, just cautious. That scared me more than if he'd shouted. I kept my voice light. "Of course not, Dad. I just needed space." Another pause. "That's good to hear." After we hung up, I immediately texted Asha. Mora. "They're getting nervous." Asha. "Good. That means they're about to make a mistake." And just like that, the air in my apartment shifted. Not lighter, but sharper. That weekend, my mother showed up. She didn't call ahead, just knocked on my door like it was Sunday brunch and not the middle of a war. When I opened it, she stood there holding a pie, smiling like she always had, like she wasn't part of something calculated and cruel. Can't a mother visit her daughter? she asked. She stepped inside without waiting for an answer. I let her. There was no point in slamming doors, not when I needed to keep the mask on, too. She set the pie on the counter and started talking about the neighbor's garden, a new TV show she liked, how Eli was busy with work. Her words floated around the room like smoke, distracting, harmless, meant to fill the silence. And then she said it. "You've always been so trusting," she said, watching me closely. "It's your best and worst trait." I didn't look up from the mug I was rinsing, but I smiled. "And yours has always been pretending." She froze, just for a second. Then she laughed, high-pitched, breathy. "Oh, Maura, always so dramatic." But her hands shook as she sliced the pie. When she left, I watched her cross the street through the peephole. Once she was gone, I turned back to the kitchen and started cleaning up. And that's when I saw it, a small flash drive tucked beneath the pie tin. I stared at it, unsure if it was deliberate or careless. I plugged it into my laptop. Files, dozens. Company ledgers, asset transfers, tax filings. But this, time. It wasn't my signature forged. It was his, my father's. He'd signed the foundation of the entire shell structure himself. They didn't realize I don't need to dig anymore. They're burying themselves. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and curled up on the couch with my old phone. I started playing voicemails I hadn't listened to in years. My dad, cheering me on when I passed the teacher's exam. My mom, crying happy tears when I moved into my first apartment. My brother, teasing me about my taste in music. For a minute, I let myself feel the ache. The kind that lives in the back of your throat and makes your chest feel too tight. Could I really go through with this? Could I be the one to destroy them? And then I remembered the sound of my father's voice behind that door weeks ago. Not proud, not loving, cold, strategic. I deleted the voicemails. They already buried what we were. 2 days passed. I kept working, organizing, labeling, waiting. The tension didn't break. It just changed temperature. Everything felt like it was one spark away from going up in flames. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Hale?" a calm voice asked. "This is Agent Morales with the IRS. We've received a complaint filed by your parents. They claim you're using their company for fraudulent activity." For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I walked to the window and looked out. My reflection stared back at me, framed in the glass, unmoving. "They didn't just defend themselves," I said quietly. "They attacked." And I smiled, just slightly, because they thought filing that complaint would scare me. But all it did was prove they were out of moves. They wanted a war? Fine, I'd let the truth do the fighting. The moment I hung up with the IRS agent, my mind went silent. No panic, no flinching. Just a steady thrum behind my eyes, like the click of a lock turning. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at the call log still glowing on my phone, and then slowly, methodically, pulled every folder from the shelf. Bank statements, signed forms, voice memos, screenshots. I laid it all out like puzzle pieces on the table where I used to drink coffee and plan lesson units. They thought I'd fall apart under pressure, but pressure leaves records, and I kept them all. That evening, Asha arrived. She barely said hello, just dropped her laptop on the table and opened it. Her brows were furrowed tight, her voice low and focused. "They filed first," she said. "Smart move, but not smart enough." We worked side by side like we had during finals in college. Only now, instead of textbooks and ramen, we were buried in evidence and strategy. She pulled up a document template labeled Counter Complaint, IRS, and began typing. I followed her rhythm, sorting files into folders. Forged forms, email headers, voice memos, digital trails, every piece labeled and time-stamped. They made it personal, she muttered. So we'll make it precise. I looked at her. I don't want to destroy them. I just want them to admit what they did. She paused, then gave a small, sharp nod. Then let's make them confess by accident. That night, we set the trap. I picked up my phone, placed it face up on the table, and dialed their number. Asha hit record and sat quietly, her eyes locked on mine. My mother answered. "Sweetheart, we've been so worried." My voice was soft, almost trembling. "Can we stop this? Please? I don't want it to get worse. Maybe we can fix it before it all unravels." There was a beat of silence. Then her sigh came through, a practiced kind of relief. "We just want you back, baby. We can deal with the paperwork, if you'll just sign a few things." My father's voice cut in, sharper. "If she signs, it's over. All of it disappears." Asha's eyes lit up. She mouthed, "Got it." "I'll think about it," I said, and ended the call. The moment I hung up, I exhaled. My hands were cold but steady. Asha uploaded the audio, attached the documents, and submitted everything under my verified account directly to the IRS. Not a single line was exaggerated, just the truth, in their own voices. Within 24 hours, the case reopened, with their names on the complaint this time. I didn't jump for joy. I didn't cry. I just sat on my couch with a blanket over my legs, watching the rain tap against the glass like it was asking to come in. For the first time in weeks, I felt still. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes peace demands war first. A week passed quietly. Then came the message. It was from my father, short, bitter. "You ruined us. I hope you're proud." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "You ruined yourself. I just stopped pretending." That night, I drove to Asheville one last time. The fall leaves had started turning along the highway, but I barely noticed them. My focus was on the small envelope in the passenger seat beside me. When I reached the house, it was just after dusk. No one was outside. The porch light flickered the same way it always had. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I walked up, set the envelope on the mat, and stepped back. Inside the envelope, copies of every forged document, printouts of their voice recordings, bank transfers, and one sheet with a single word printed in bold, "Returned." I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices behind the curtain. I turned and walked away. By the time I reached my car, the rain had picked up again, soft at first, then heavier. And in the distance, just as I opened the door, I heard sirens, faint but growing closer. Red and blue lights flickered in the wet reflection across the house's windows. I didn't flinch. I didn't look back. I didn't call them this time. But truth has its own way of finding the guilty. I started the engine, headlights slicing through the rain as I pulled away. Asha's name lit up on my screen. I answered on speaker. "You okay?" she asked. I stared straight ahead. My voice was quiet, steady. "I'm finally free." But freedom doesn't erase the scars. It just teaches you how to wear them. It's been 3 weeks since the sirens echoed in the distance, chasing justice into the corners, my silence once protected. Since then, I haven't touched a courtroom or signed another legal document. Everything moved forward without me. Auditors, attorneys, agents with clipboards and pressed shirts. I became just a name in their files, a name I'd reclaimed. Each morning looks the same now. I wake up without an alarm. I make my coffee in silence, water the plants I nearly let die when all this started, and sit by the window while the sun climbs slowly across the floor. My phone buzzes, then stops. Sometimes it rings. I don't answer. I thought things would feel lighter once the weight was gone, but I was wrong. Now that the noise has faded, what's left behind is a kind of ache that sits quietly inside my ribs. the kind you can't name or shake. One morning, without thinking much about it, I take the long way home from the grocery store. My car turns left at the light instead of right, like some part of me needed to remember. I drive past the house where I grew up. The blinds are drawn. Mail spills from the box onto the porch. The grass is longer than I've ever seen it, wild and reaching toward the street. A notice hangs crooked on the front door. Foreclosure. The porch light's still flickering. I pull over and step out, not crossing the yard, just standing at the same rusted gate I used to swing on when I was small enough for my feet to lift off the ground. I whisper, "I warned you," and then I leave. There's nothing for me there anymore. Later that day, when I return to my apartment, there's a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting, shaky and slanted, is unmistakable. My mother's. I open it at the kitchen counter, where the sunlight now leans in soft and quiet. The note is brief. No apologies, no explanations. Just this: I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll remember us before we forgot ourselves. Inside the envelope, folded neatly, is a napkin. White cotton, hand-stitched, with a single faint coffee stain in one corner. The same napkin she used to tuck into my lunchbox for field trips. The same one I clutched in my hands the day she told me to trust her with the paperwork. The same one I used to wipe tears I didn't even understand. Now it just feels clean. That night, I finally call Asha. We haven't talked in days, not since everything wrapped up. We don't talk about evidence or court filings. We talk about her new project at work, about the bakery she found near her office, about how weird it is that we used to share ramen and now we swap tax tips. And then she asks quietly, "Do you feel vindicated?" I lean my head back against the couch and stare at the ceiling. "No," I say. "I feel done." She laughs softly. "That's better than revenge." "No," I say again. "It's quieter." We let the silence stretch between us, not heavy, just honest. Peace doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you stop needing them to. Weeks go by. Then one morning, while sipping my second cup of coffee, I open an email from the Department of Financial Services. The subject line is simple: "All records corrected." I stare at the words for a while, not reading the details. I already know what they say. My name is mine again. I close the laptop, let the warmth from the mug seep into my hands. Then, for the first time in what feels like forever, I take a full breath that doesn't hurt on the way in. Later that week, another letter arrives. This one is from Eli. I haven't seen his name in so long it feels foreign, like reading a street sign from a town I barely remember living in. Inside is a photo, faded and curled at the corners. The four of us, standing in front of the fireplace, all wearing matching sweaters that Christmas Eve when the power went out. I remember how we laughed, how we burned frozen pizza in the oven and ate it anyway. There's a note. "Maura, we're meeting next month. Mom's sick. She wants to see you." I sit at the table with the photo in one hand, the note in the other. I don't cry, I don't smile, I just sit. Because family doesn't end when justice begins. Sometimes it waits quietly at the edge of healing for the next chapter. And part of me still wondered if forgiveness could ever be earned. It was early autumn when I pulled off the side of the road in Asheville, just a few blocks from the house I once called home. The trees had started to shed their gold and rust-colored leaves, carpeting the ground like something sacred had fallen and broken apart. The air carried that sharp crispness that hinted at colder days ahead, and for a long moment I just stood there on the porch, my fingers wrapped around the car keys, listening to the soft ticking of the cooling engine behind me. The house looked smaller now, worn. The paint was beginning to peel around the shutters, and the doorbell still had that uneven buzz when I pressed it years ago. Funny how time moves forward, even when the people inside don't. I rested my hand on the doorknob but didn't turn it. My stomach tightened, breath shallow, heart steady but slow. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. I almost turned back, and then I heard it, coughing from inside, dry and weak. The door creaked open before I knocked. Eli stood there, shoulders slumped. A man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. The same man who once teased me for organizing my shoes by color, who used to hide my diary in the freezer just to mess with me. His face now carried a quiet grief I recognized immediately. "She's been asking for you," he said. "No hi, no Mora, not even Mom wants to see you." Just those words, flat and bare. I nodded, stepped inside. The air smelled like old coffee and dust. That used to mean warmth in this house. Now it smelled like waiting, like something unfinished. The living room was dim, blinds half closed, light bleeding through in streaks across the floor. My mother lay on the couch, a blanket pulled up to her chin, oxygen tubing at her nose. Her skin looked almost translucent. When her eyes opened and met mine, she didn't try to sit up. Just watched me for a second that felt longer than it was. "You came," she said, voice thin. "You called," I replied. Neither of us moved. A minute passed, maybe more. Then she whispered, "I wish I'd taught you strength without cruelty. I used yours when I lost mine." Something in me cracked, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, every word pressing down like weight I'd carried too long. She motioned toward the nightstand beside her. I walked over and saw it, folded neatly next to a glass of water. That napkin, the same embroidered one she gave me when I was 8, after a scraped knee. The same one I found in her apology letter weeks ago. Now washed, ironed, carefully placed. I picked it up. The fabric felt soft in my hand. Familiar, but it didn't sting anymore. Some memories lose their edge when you stop trying to repair them. I sat down in the chair next to her. I didn't say, "I forgive you." I didn't need to. I just took her hand. Her fingers were colder than I remembered, but she didn't let go. There were no confessions, no dramatic apologies, just the sound of the oxygen machine in the background, keeping rhythm with the silence we no longer needed to fill. After a while, she turned her head slightly and said, "You always wanted peace." I squeezed her hand gently. "You finally found it," she added. I nodded. So did you. We didn't talk after that. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, still holding her hand. I don't know how long I sat there. Time didn't matter. A few days later, I visited the lake near our old neighborhood. It was the same place we used to go when I was a kid, back when forgiveness wasn't something we had to ask for, when life was still simple and trust was easy. The air was cool, the water still. I knelt by the edge and took the napkin from my coat pocket, folded just like before. I placed it on the surface, watched it float for a second, then sink beneath the ripples. Some inherit money, some inherit pain. I inherited both and turned it into peace. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Asha. "Dinner tomorrow? No lawsuits, just wine." I smiled, already picturing her side-eyeing the wine list like it had offended her. "Sounds perfect," I typed back. I walked slowly to the car, hands in my jacket pockets. The trees rustled above, gold and fading orange. Before getting in, I looked up at the sky, soft and pale, the way it gets just before evening. And I whispered, "I came home for closure. I found freedom instead." So